On a bright winter morning in Michigan, a police sergeant heard scratching behind a sealed trailer door. Inside was Sentry, a German Shepherd K9 the department said had died 3 years ago. Weak, thirsty, and covered in dust, the dog still refused to leave one orange case behind. Sergeant Corbett Drayton knew that case was tied to the partner he had failed to question for. But this time, breaking the rules could destroy the only truth Sentry had kept alive. What do you do when loyalty points to the truth, but the law tells you to wait? Tell us where you're watching from, share your thoughts, and please, like and subscribe to help us reach 5,000 subscribers. The morning after the blizzard, North Marquette looked too clean to be hiding anything. Snow lay over the town in bright, unbroken sheets. It rounded the roofs of diners and bait shops, softened the shoulders of parked cars, and turned the pines along the highway into dark green towers under white glass. Far beyond the low buildings, Lake Superior held a cold blue shine beneath the winter sun, wide and still, as if the storm had never had the courage to touch it. By 9 o'clock, the plows were out in force. Their steel blades scraped rhythmically along the highway, pushing walls of snow toward the shoulders. In the town square, workers were clearing space for the winter ice-carving festival. Children in thick coats watched from behind a rope line, while blocks of cloudy ice were lowered onto wooden pallets. Steam rose from a coffee stand. Someone laughed, someone cursed at a frozen generator. The day had the ordinary brightness of a place determined to keep moving. Sergeant Corbett Miles Drayton preferred days like that. Clear light, visible roads, clean edges. He stood behind White Gull Travel Center, one gloved hand resting on his duty belt, his fitted dark navy uniform half hidden beneath a heavy police parka. The black tactical vest under the coat sat square against his broad chest. A radio mic clipped near his left shoulder gave a faint hiss whenever dispatch breathed through static. His badge caught the sun for half a second, then dulled again beneath drifting frost. At 40, Corbett still moved like a man who expected his body to answer when called. Tall, athletic, shoulders broad without the restless bulk of someone trying to prove strength. His face was rugged and angular, light-tanned skin drawn tight over cheekbones and jaw, blue-gray eyes sharp beneath short dark brown police-style hair brushed flat by his winter cap. Very short stubble shadowed his jaw, not from neglect, but from a long shift that had begun before dawn. The call had sounded simple. A tractor-trailer had slid during the night, clipped the rear fence of the impound hold, and come to rest against a snowbank. No serious injuries, no dramatic pursuit, no frantic crowd. Just damaged chain link, insurance paperwork, a tired driver, and a lot of frozen metal that needed names, numbers, and photographs. Corbett liked simple calls for the same reason he liked plowed roads. They had lines. Fence post is bent clean through. Bonnie Ray Pender said behind him. Bonnie was the night manager at White Gull, though the word manager did not quite cover her. She seemed to own the place through force of habit. Short, sturdy, with gray-blonde hair clipped at the back of her neck and reading glasses hanging low on a cord. She had a face that made liars feel underdressed. A black apron with the White Gull logo hung over a red and black flannel shirt, and the large ring of keys at her hip announced her arrival before she spoke. Corbett looked at the torn fence, then at the white trailer parked inside the hold lot. "That one part of the accident?" he asked. Bonnie followed his gaze. "No. That trailer's been sitting there since Sunday. Pale River Transit. Papers didn't match the cargo declaration. State boys had the driver taken in for questions, and we got told not to touch it until somebody important decided who owned the headache." Corbett made a note. The trailer was plain white, its sides streaked with gray road salt and frozen runoff. A yellow hold tag hung from the rear latch, stiff with ice. Pale River Transit had a small blue logo near the front, half covered by wind-blown snow. Nothing about it asked to be remembered. That was usually how trouble arrived. Not shouting, not glowing red, just ordinary enough to be ignored. Corbett stepped closer to the fence line and lifted his flashlight even though the sun was out. Habit more than need. He checked the latch from a distance, photographed the hold tag, the tire marks, the broken fence, the position of the trailer relative to the damaged post. Then he heard it. A faint scratch. He stopped moving. Bonnie's keys clicked once as she shifted her weight. "What?" Corbett raised one hand without looking back. The plow out front scraped along the highway. A diesel engine coughed near the fuel island. Somewhere inside the travel center, a delivery bell rang twice. There it was again. Scratch. Not loud, not metal settling, not ice cracking under sun. It came from behind the trailer doors, low and uneven, like claws dragging against ribbed flooring. Bonnie frowned. Could be a loose panel. Could be, Corbett said. But his body had already changed. Not fear, not alarm. Focus. His eyes narrowed, his breathing slowed. He felt the familiar weight of the black wristwatch against his skin, the shape of the scuffed silver evidence pen in his coat pocket, the cold bite of air at the edge of his collar. A call became something else the moment a detail refused to fit. He angled his body toward the trailer, but did not cross the hold line. "Camera still covering this lot?" he asked. "Every inch worth stealing from," Bonnie said. "Why?" "Don't shut it off." Her humor faded. The third sound came weaker than the first two. A scrape, then a pause. Then something that might have been a breath. Corbett looked at the yellow tag twisting at the latch. The manifest said K9 training equipment and veterinary supplies. No live animals, no refrigeration, no emergency contact flagged. On paper, the trailer was just freight under dispute. On paper, a lot of things had looked clean before. He pressed the button on his radio and requested animal response, state notification, and permission guidance for a possible live animal trapped in a sealed transport. His voice stayed calm. He heard it himself and almost trusted it. Bonnie stared at the trailer. "You really think something's inside?" "I think if there is, we're not making this worse by guessing." That was the rule Corbett had built his life around, after one old report had taught him what a careless line could bury. Write the time. Keep the camera on. Get the right witness. Do not turn instinct into evidence before evidence can stand. Still, as he waited in the cold, he found his thumb rubbing the edge of the pen in his pocket. The pen had signed too many clean pages. For several minutes, the bright winter morning kept pretending nothing had changed. Drivers crossed the lot with coffee cups. A child near the square shouted at a block of ice, shaped vaguely like a bear. Sunlight flashed on the lake. The world was very good at continuing while something behind a steel wall used its last strength to be heard. Dr. Helena Quaid arrived in a county animal care truck with snow packed around the wheel wells. She came out carrying a dark teal rescue bag and wearing a gray-green field jacket over winter layers. Her reddish-brown hair was tied low, and a teal stethoscope peeked from the bag's open pocket. She moved quickly, but not dramatically, which Corbett appreciated. Some people brought panic to emergencies and called it compassion. "Where?" she asked. Corbett pointed. Rear of that trailer. 3 separate scratching sounds. 1 possible breath. No one opened it yet. Helena gave him a brief look that said she had expected less discipline from a roadside call and was glad to be wrong. She crouched near the doors, careful not to touch the latch. "Hello in there," she called softly. For a few seconds, the trailer said nothing. Then a dull thump came from inside. Bonnie's face hardened. "Open it." Corbett looked at the body cam light on his chest, then at the hold tag. "Time is 9:27 a.m., he said. "Present are Sergeant Corbett Drayton, Bonnie Pender, Site Manager, and Dr. Helena Quaid, County Animal Care. Possible live animal inside sealed trailer. Opening for welfare check under emergency necessity." He cut the ice around the latch first. Helena stood back with a slip lead ready. Bonnie kept her phone up, recording from a second angle, her keys clenched in the hand not holding the camera. The metal fought them. When the right door finally opened, stale air rolled out into the clean morning. Dust, plastic wrap, damp cardboard, spilled water, old cold. Beneath it, faint but unmistakable, was the smell of a living animal held too long, in a place never meant for breath. "Low light," Helena said. Corbett angled his flashlight toward the floor. The inside of the trailer appeared in pieces. Pallets wrapped in cloudy plastic. Boxes labeled training sleeves, scent tubes, veterinary pads. A cracked water jug on its side. Scattered bits of dry food. Scrape marks near the rear, then the eyes, amber brown, steady and low in the shadows. A male German shepherd stood near the back wall, lean from hunger but still built, with powerful lines beneath the grime. His black and tan coat was dulled by dust and salt. A dark saddle spread across his back, slightly heavier to the left. His tan chest and legs looked almost copper beneath the cold light. His muzzle was dark and silvered at the edges. One ear stood straight. The tip of the other folded outward just enough to make the fierce face painfully real. He was standing in front of an orange polymer transport case. Not beside it by accident. In front of it by decision. Helena breathed out through her nose. Male shepherd, adult, dehydrated. Still alert. Corbett saw more than that. He saw training, boundary, position. A dog who had been taught that the body could become a door when there was no other lock left. Helena unfolded a bowl and poured water. The sound struck the trailer floor gently. The shepherd's eyes flicked to it. His tongue moved once over his nose. Every part of him wanted the water. He did not move. "Easy," Helena said. "No one is taking anything." The dog's gaze shifted to Corbett. It was not pleading. That would have been easier. It was assessment. A tired working dog deciding whether the uniform at the door was a threat, a handler, or just another human about to misunderstand. Corbett lowered himself to one knee outside the trailer. Snow soaked through the fabric over his knee. He kept his shoulders turned slightly away, and his hands visible. "No one's asking you to leave your post," he said, voice low. "Just step down long enough to let her help." The shepherd held his eyes. Behind Corbett, Bonnie whispered, "That dog understands you?" "Maybe," Helena murmured. "Or maybe he understands the tone." The shepherd took one step. His front paw trembled when it touched the ribbed floor. Then another. He reached the bowl and drank in short, controlled pulls, never fully turning away from the orange case. Corbett did not smile. Something in his chest had tightened too much for that. Helena moved slowly, checking what she could from a distance. "Good boy, that's it." At the words "good boy," the dog's ear twitched, not toward Helena, but toward Corbett, as if searching for a voice that should have been there and was not. A collar showed under the dust at his neck. Black leather, old, cracked in places. A metal nameplate hung from it, scratched nearly dull. Helena waited until the dog had taken a few more mouthfuls before she shifted closer. "I'm just looking," she said. The shepherd stiffened. Corbett spoke before the growl could fully form. "Steady." The word came out of him without thought. The dog froze, not relaxed, not trusting, but listening. Helena wiped the plate with her thumb. The letters appeared one by one beneath the grime. Sentry. The cold moved through Corbett so quickly he almost lost the shape of the morning. Bonnie glanced at him. "You know that name." Corbett did not answer at first. 3 winters ago, Lieutenant Arlen Beckett had gone off a bridge during a transport run in weather just like this. Officially, his K9 had been injured too badly to survive. Officially, the case had been closed. Officially, Corbett had signed the final supplemental review with the same silver pen sitting in his pocket. He had believed the paper because believing the paper had let the town bury Arlen with fewer questions. Now the dog from that paper was standing in front of him, breathing. "Sentry," Corbett said. The shepherd's eyes came up. For a moment the trailer, the cold, the travel center, Bonnie's keys, Helena's rescue bag, all of it seemed to fall quiet around that name. Helena looked from the dog to Corbett, understanding enough not to ask everything. "We need to get him out." Corbett nodded, though it cost him effort. "The case stays secured, tagged, photographed. No one moves it without documentation." At the word "moves," Sentry stepped back toward the orange case. "Hey," Corbett said softly. "You heard me. It stays." Sentry watched him. Corbett removed his heavy police parka and laid it just inside the trailer door, where the dog could see it and the case at the same time. "Come on," he said. "New position. Same job." Sentry hesitated. His legs shook. Pride and exhaustion fought visibly through his body. Then he stepped down, one paw, then the next, onto the snow-packed ground. Helena caught him only with her nearness, not her hands. She gave him room to keep his dignity. Bonnie made a sound under her breath that might have been anger or relief. Inside the office, they set a bowl of water near the wall and a blanket on the floor. Sentry ignored the blanket. He turned once, dragged Corbett's parka closer with his teeth, and lowered himself onto it. His head stayed pointed toward the storage room where the orange case had been placed under temporary seal. Corbett stood beside the window, looking through the glass at the white trailer in the snow. His morning had begun with a bent fence and an insurance report. It had become a living correction to a dead file, A dog the department had buried on paper lay on his coat, and even half-starved, even shaking, even with his eyes closing from exhaustion, Sentry was still guarding the thing people had once claimed was gone. The office at White Gull Travel Center had never been built to hold the past. It was a narrow room behind the counter, with one window looking toward the fuel islands and another facing the impound lot. A cheap wall heater ticked under the desk. A coffee maker hissed beside a stack of invoices. The air smelled of wet wool, burnt coffee, disinfectant, and the sharp winter odor that followed people inside when snow melted off their boots. Sentry lay on Sergeant Corbett Drayton's police parka near the inside wall. The German Shepherd had accepted more water, but not peace. His body was stretched low, ribs rising and falling with controlled effort, amber-brown eyes half open beneath tired lids. Every few seconds, those eyes shifted toward the storage room, where the orange polymer case had been placed under temporary seal. Even exhausted, he measured the room like a working dog. Not a rescued stray, not a frightened pet, a K-9 who still believed he had been given a job, Doctor. Helena Quaid knelt beside him, one knee on a folded towel Bonnie Ray Pender had thrown down without making a fuss about it. Helena worked with quiet patience, checking the dog's gums, paw pads, shoulder movement, and pulse. She did not crowd him. She did not speak to him in a sugary voice. She treated him like a creature with dignity, which was the first kindness he seemed willing to allow. "He's dehydrated," she said. "Underfed. Pads are scraped, but not badly enough to explain how long he may have been in that trailer. No obvious fresh break, no deep wound that I can see right now." Bonnie stood by the desk, arms folded over her apron. Her gray blonde hair had come loose near one temple, but she looked too irritated to fix it. "That your professional way of saying somebody had no business sealing him in there." Helena glanced up. "That is my professional way of not saying what I'd like to say on a recorded scene." Corbett heard the words, but stayed focused on the storage room door. Bonnie had cleared the room herself, locked the interior hallway, and made sure the camera above the storage shelves was still working. The orange case sat inside on a low metal cart, photographed, tagged, and logged. Corbett had recorded the seal, the label, the scratches on the outer shell, and the code stamp near the side handle, KX4421. A harmless sequence to anyone else. To Corbett, it had teeth. 3 years earlier, Lieutenant Arlen Beckett had been driving through heavy snow with an evidence transfer listed under a similar KX code. His vehicle went off a narrow bridge before dawn. The report said road conditions, low visibility, and loss of control. The report said the transport material was not recovered. The report said Arlen's K-9, Sentry, had been taken to a contractor veterinary facility and later marked deceased. The report had been signed, reviewed, and closed. Corbett had signed one of the final supplemental pages. He could still feel the pen in his hand. "Sergeant." Helena's voice pulled him back. Corbett looked down. Sentry's eyes were on him now, not the door. Watchful, tired, almost accusing, though Corbett knew that was unfair. Dogs did not carry accusations the way people did. People invented them, then suffered under the weight. "You said you knew his name," Helena said carefully. Bonnie stopped pretending not to listen. Corbett rubbed one thumb along the edge of the black wristwatch under his glove. He belonged to Lieutenant Arlen Beckett, Michigan Highway Patrol K-9 detail before the regional unit was folded into state contracts. "Belonged," Helena repeated, not challenging, only marking the word. "Worked with," Corbett corrected. Sentry's right ear, the one with the slight bent tip, flicked at Arlen's name. No one missed it. Helena reached into her rescue bag and removed a handheld microchip scanner. "I need to confirm." Corbett nodded. She let Sentry see the scanner first. The dog lifted his head an inch, then lowered it again. Helena moved the device slowly along his shoulder. "It beeped," Bonnie muttered. "That little sound better come with answers." Helena read the number aloud and entered it into her phone. The office seemed to shrink while the database loaded. Outside, a snowplow passed the window, its amber light washing briefly across the room. The world outside continued in bright, ordinary motion. Inside, 3 people and 1 tired dog waited for a screen to decide how much of the dead would become alive again. Helena's expression changed first. Not shock. Something tighter. Professional concern meeting a door it did not want to open. "What?" Corbett asked. "The chip is registered to the Michigan Highway Patrol K9 program," she said. "Name Sentry. Male German Shepherd. Assigned handler, Lieutenant Arlen Beckett." Bonnie closed her eyes. Lord. Helena kept reading. Status update from 3 years ago. Injured during transport incident. Transferred to Northline Working Dogs for medical handling and disposition. Her mouth hardened around the last word. Final status. Deceased. Sentry exhaled through his nose and pressed his chin more deeply into Corbett's parka. For a moment, nobody spoke. Corbett had stood at Arlen's memorial beside men and women in pressed uniforms while a folded flag was handed to Maris Beckett. He remembered Sentry being mentioned only once, politely, as if the dog's death were an unfortunate footnote to a tragic mourning. He remembered being grateful that no one asked too many questions in front of the widow. That gratitude felt ugly now, because maybe it had not been mercy. Maybe it had been convenience dressed in black. Helena turned the phone so Corbett could see the screen. There's no proper veterinary certificate attached, no image confirmation, no cremation record, just a contractor update and a closed administrative note. Corbett read it twice. A living dog was lying at his feet, while a state database calmly insisted otherwise. The office door opened before he could answer. Captain Odessa Wynn stepped inside with winter sunlight behind her, bringing the temperature of the room down without raising her voice. Odessa had a steady presence that made officers straighten before realizing they had done it. Tall, composed, dark hair cut short and brushed with silver. She wore a dark navy command coat over her uniform. Her eyes moved once across the room. Corbett, Helena, Bonnie, Sentry, storage door. She understood the shape of the problem before anyone explained it. "Tell me what we have," she said. Corbett gave it cleanly. Trailer, welfare entry, dog recovered, orange case, secured, KX4421, microchip record, Arlen Beckett. Odessa listened without interrupting. When he finished, she looked at him for one long second. "And your connection to Beckett?" Corbett felt Bonnie's attention shift toward him. Helena kept her hand near Sentry's shoulder, but her eyes lifted too. "He was my partner before he transferred to the highway unit," Corbett said. "Friend, too. That is not a footnote, Sergeant." "No, Mom. Were you involved in any report connected to his death?" The question was not cruel. That almost made it worse. Corbett looked at Sentry. The dog did not blink. "Yes," he said. "Supplemental review. Local assistance and scene continuity." Odessa's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "If this case touches that report, you disclose that now and you do not handle anything alone. No shortcuts, no emotional authority. Do you understand me? I do." Before Odessa could say more, a long blast from an air brake rolled through the window from the truck lot. It was ordinary. A driver releasing pressure. A sound Corbett had heard 1,000 times. But the office tilted. Not visibly. Not to anyone else at first. It happened inside him. The heater tick became radio static. The white light on the window became snow and headlights. He saw the narrow bridge again, the guardrail broken, red and blue light flashing across the frozen road. He heard a voice say the transport item was gone. He heard another voice say there was nothing more to do until daylight. His hand reached for the silver pen in his pocket. Then warmth pressed against his leg. Sentry had risen without a sound. The dog leaned his shoulder into Corbett's knee, not hard enough to knock him off balance, just enough to give his body a place to come back to. Corbett inhaled once. Office, coffee, heater. Bonnie's keys. Helena's teal stethoscope. Odessa by the door. Sentry alive. "I'm here," Corbett said under his breath. Helena watched the dog with new understanding. That's trained behavior. Odessa's expression softened only slightly. "Arlen taught him that?" "Maybe," Helena said. "Or someone did. Pressure contact. Grounding." He recognized the change before any of us said a word. Corbett lowered his hand from the pen. The shame that followed was quiet and precise. Sentry had been marked dead by the system. Corbett trusted, hidden somewhere inside paperwork. And yet the dog still knew how to bring a man back from a memory. The dog had done his job better than the report had done its own. A state SUV arrived 20 minutes later. Special Agent Sabine Porter Hale entered with snow on the shoulders of her black parka and a graphite document case in one hand. She was not tall in a commanding way, but she carried focus like a blade kept covered until needed. Her dark bob was tucked behind one ear and her brown eyes took in the room quickly without performance. "Agent Hale," Odessa said. Sabine nodded. "Captain Sergeant Drayton." Corbett had never met her, but she already knew his name. That told him this was bigger than a dog in a trailer. Sabine listened to the summary, reviewed the photographs, then studied Sentry from a respectful distance. The dog watched her back, not hostile, evaluating. Finally, Sabine looked toward the storage room. "No one opens the case." Bonnie made a small sound. "That was going to be my first suggestion." "And the first mistake," Sabine said, not unkindly. "A partial code, a missing dog record, and a canine guarding behavior are serious. They are not enough by themselves to open a sealed transport item tied to a private carrier, especially if someone produces updated ownership documents." Corbett felt his jaw set. "You think someone will?" "I think the companies around this chain have a habit of becoming very organized the moment something useful is found." Sabine opened her case and removed a thin folder. Several pages were marked in pale blue highlighter. Pale River Transit has appeared in a review involving short hop evidence movement, retired K-9 contractors, training facilities, and storage vendors. Nothing public, nothing ready for charges. But enough that I drove here instead of sending a phone request. Bonnie looked toward the storage room. "So the box matters." Sabine's answer was careful. "It may." Corbett hated the word may. It was a narrow bridge over deep water. His eyes moved to Sentry. The dog had lowered himself again, but his head remained up, still watching, still holding the room in the order he understood. Corbett wanted to open the case. He wanted the truth to be as simple as a latch, a seal, a revealed object under fluorescent light. He wanted to erase 3 years of silence with one clean discovery. But he knew better. Evidence mishandled became doubt. Doubt became a door. And people who survived by paperwork knew how to walk through doors like that. Sabine seemed to read his face. "Sergeant, if you are right, this case is too important to touch wrong." That landed where anger could not. Corbett nodded once. "Then we do it right." The words felt less like discipline now, and more like punishment he had chosen. Near the wall, Sentry shifted, as if the tension in the room had changed shape. His paw rested on the edge of Corbett's parka. The orange case remained behind the storage door, sealed and waiting. By late afternoon, Corbett stood alone in the narrow hallway outside the office, phone in hand. He had postponed the call twice, then 3 times. Maris Eleanor Beckett's number had remained in his contacts, because deleting it would have felt like a second betrayal. He had never used it after the funeral. Not once. Birthdays passed, holidays passed. The anniversary passed 3 times, each one handled by silence. He pressed call before courage could expire. Maris answered on the 4th ring. "Corbett?" Her voice was older than he remembered. Not weaker, sharper if anything, pared down by years that had not been gentle. "It's me," he said. A pause. "What happened?" He closed his eyes. She knew. People who had lost someone learned the weight of calls before words arrived. "I'm at White Gull Travel Center," he said. "There was a sealed trailer. We found a dog inside." Another pause, longer. Corbett looked through the office window. Sentry lay on his parka, eyes open, facing the storage room. "It's Sentry," Corbett said. For a long time, Maris said nothing. He heard only the faint sound of her breathing and, somewhere on her end, a clock ticking in a room he had not entered in 3 years. When she finally spoke, her voice did not break. "If the dog is alive," she said, "what else in the report you signed wasn't true?" Corbett had spent 3 years fearing that question. Now that it had come, he discovered fear had been too small a word. He looked at Sentry, then at the storage room door, then at the silver pen still heavy in his pocket. "I don't know," he said, and for the first time since Arlen Beckett died, it was the only honest answer he had. By late afternoon, the snow outside White Gull Travel Center had become almost too bright to look at. Sunlight struck the plowed banks along the fuel island and broke into hard white glare. Every truck that rolled through the lot carried a skin of salt and ice. Drivers stepped carefully over frozen ridges, shoulders hunched, coffee steaming in their hands. Beyond the highway, the town square was still preparing for the ice festival. A crane lifted another cloudy block into place, while children watched from behind orange cones, their laughter thin but clear in the cold air. Inside Bonnie Ray Pender's back office, No one cared about the pretty day anymore. Bonnie pulled the blinds halfway down and turned the computer monitor away from the window glare. "There," she said, clicking through a security folder with the irritated competence of a woman who had saved more receipts than most people saved memories. 3 days back. North camera. Hold lot. Sergeant Corbett Drayton stood behind her chair with his arms folded, not crowding but unable to sit. The room had taken on the shape of a temporary command post. Coffee cups stood beside evidence bags. Helena Quade's teal rescue bag rested under the coat rack. Sentry lay on Corbett's parka near the inner wall, tired but awake, his amber-brown eyes tracking every movement toward the storage room. The orange case remained sealed behind that door. KX-4421. Corbett had stopped looking at it directly. Looking did nothing. Touching would ruin everything. So he looked at the things around it. The people, the cameras, the timestamps, the paperwork. Truth rarely came walking in whole. It came in fragments, and a careful person either built something from them or stepped over them until they disappeared. Bonnie rewound the footage. The screen showed the impound lot during the blizzard, the image grainy from snow and low light. A tow rig backed the Pale River Transit trailer into the hold area shortly after midnight 3 days earlier. The driver remained inside the cab of a county unit, head lowered, face mostly hidden by the window glare. A transfer clerk in a hooded winter coat stepped out with a clipboard and pointed once toward the fence. No panic, no urgency. Just a trailer being placed where trailers went when paperwork failed. The clerk signed the temporary hold sheet. The tow operator locked the gate. After that, no one touched the trailer. For 3 days, while people bought sandwiches and fuel and souvenir mugs with gulls painted on them, Sentry had been behind the steel wall. Helena watched from the corner, her expression controlled but not empty. "He had water at some point," she said quietly. "Not enough. But someone either left something in there or expected him to last long enough." Bonnie stopped moving the mouse. "That makes it worse." "Yes," Helena said, "it does." Special Agent Sabine Porter Hale spread a set of printed records across the desk. She had taken off her black parka and now wore a gray turtleneck under a dark investigator's jacket. Her short black hair tucked neatly behind one ear, and a pale blue marker rested between her fingers like a surgeon's tool. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Every sentence she gave seemed to arrive already weighed. "Pale River Transit is small," she said. "Short-haul work mostly. Michigan, Wisconsin, northern Indiana, sometimes across toward Minnesota. Nothing glamorous. Their public record is clean enough to stay boring." Bonnie leaned back. "Boring is where people hide things." Sabine marked one line in blue. "Exactly." Corbett looked over the pages. "They worked with Northline? Not directly every time." Sabine slid one page forward. "That's the trick. Pale River appears under transport orders from Lake Banner Storage. Lake Banner received training equipment from Great Shore K-9 Services. Great Shore used to share a mailing address with Granite Field Training. Granite Field leased the old K-9 facility near Sault Ste. Marie. Northline working dogs billed consulting hours to all of them at different points." Bonnie stared at the paper. "That sounds like 4 companies wearing one coat." Sabine's eyes lifted briefly. "A coat with many pockets." Helena rubbed one hand over her forehead. "And Sentry's chip record ends at Northline." "His living record does," Sabine said. "His paper record ends with death." The word moved through the room without needing drama. Sentry lifted his head. Corbett felt it before he looked down. The dog had not reacted to the names of the companies. He had reacted to the change in voices, the tightening of human breath around a word people use too easily, when a form required finality. Corbett crouched and let his fingers rest near the edge of the parka. He did not touch Sentry yet. He had learned that the dog accepted nearness before comfort. "You're still here," he said, barely above a whisper. Sentry's eyes remained on him. For the first time that day, Corbett wondered whether the worst part of being marked gone was not the danger itself, but the loneliness of having no one left officially looking. A car door closed outside. Bonnie checked the front monitor. "Woman at the side entrance." Corbett stood before he saw the screen. Maris Eleanor Beckett stepped into the office, carrying a worn cardboard file box against her coat, like it weighed more than paper. She wore a gray winter parka over dark trousers, Snow melted along the shoulders, and a burgundy scarf wrapped close to her throat. Her hair, ash blonde and loosely pinned back, had escaped in pale strands near her cheek. She looked older than the last time Corbett had seen her, but not diminished. Grief had not softened her. It had sharpened every quiet line of her face. She did not hug him. She did not offer her hand. Her eyes went first to Corbett, then to Odessa Wynne near the door, then to Sabine's papers, then finally to the German shepherd on the floor. The file box shifted in her arms. "Sentry," she said. The dog raised his head fully. For a second, the office stopped being an office. It became a place where time had made a mistake, and everyone present had to decide whether to forgive it. Maris did not move toward him at once. Her fingers tightened around the box. Corbett knew that look, not fear of the dog, fear of what touching him would confirm. Helena spoke gently. "He's tired and dehydrated, but stable. He may remember familiar people. Let him choose the distance." Maris nodded once, but her eyes never left Sentry. "I brought what Arlen kept at home," she said, "the things that never made it into the official report." She placed the box on the desk. She still did not look at Corbett when she opened it. Inside were folders, photographs, an old training schedule, a small notebook with a cracked black cover, and a plastic sleeve containing receipts and handwritten route notes. Everything had the careful disorder of belongings saved by someone who had spent years not knowing whether keeping them was hope or punishment. Sabine put on gloves before touching anything. That small respect changed Maris's face more than any condolence would have. "This stays documented," Sabine said. "You retain ownership until we log what is relevant." "Good," Maris replied. "I'm tired of people taking pieces of my husband and giving me summaries." No one answered. Corbett looked down. Sabine lifted a photograph first. Arlen Beckett stood in a snowy training yard beside Sentry, who looked younger, leaner, his black and tan coat clean and bright. Arlen had one hand low at his side, fingers loose near the dog's shoulder. He was smiling towards someone outside the frame. Maris saw Corbett looking. "You took that picture," he remembered then. A cold morning behind the regional K9 facility. Arlen laughing because Sentry had refused to release a training sleeve until Corbett stopped calling him Sir as a joke. "I did," Corbett said. "That was 2 weeks before the bridge." The room quietly rearranged around the sentence. Sabine continued through the box. A route note, a transfer receipt, a copy of a manifest with one number scratched out and another written above it in blue ink. Then a torn piece of yellow legal paper folded twice. She opened it. The handwriting was cramped, familiar to Maris before anyone else. Sabine read aloud. "The boxes are coming back with different numbers," Bonnie whispered. "That does not sound like a man worried about a typo." Sabine did not smile. "No, it doesn't." She laid the note beside the KX-442E1 photograph. "This suggests repetition. Not one missing case, not one clerical error. A pattern of items leaving under one identity and returning under another." Corbett heard the old report in his mind, polite and final. Weather, low visibility, lost transport material, no evidence of broader issue. He had let that sentence live. Maris turned to him then. "You saw it, didn't you?" The office did not give him anywhere to hide. Corbett could have asked what she meant. He could have answered like a man under review, narrow and guarded. He could have waited for a lawyer, a captain, a policy. Instead, he looked at the scratched-out number in Arlen's papers and said, "Yes." Maris's face did not change. Corbett forced himself to continue. "There was a mismatch between one scene photo and the final sheet," I asked. "I was told it was a data entry correction, and you accepted that." "Yes, because it was easier." He looked at her then. "Because Arlen was dead. Because you were being handed a flag. Because every person in uniform was telling me not to turn his funeral into an investigation I could not prove." Maris stared at him, eyes bright but steady. "That sounds almost noble when you say it carefully." Corbett took the blow without looking away. "It wasn't." Her chin lifted slightly. "I don't think you caused the bridge," she said. "I don't think you wanted any of this. But you helped them bury the last question Arlen asked." The words were quiet enough that Bonnie's coffee maker seemed suddenly too loud. Corbett had imagined Maris shouting. He had imagined accusation, blame, anger sharp enough to defend against. This was worse. She had not thrown grief at him. She had placed it in his hands and made him feel its exact weight. Sentry stood, No one called him. He moved slowly, paws careful on the office floor, body still worn down from hunger and cold. Helena shifted as if to help, then stopped herself. Sentry crossed the space between Corbett and Maris with the grave patience of an animal who understood people were fragile when they smelled of old sorrow. Maris stepped back once. Sentry stopped, his ears angled forward, his head lowered. Then he took one more step and placed his muzzle beneath Maris's open hand. She froze. Corbett saw the moment recognition broke through fear. Maris's fingers moved, not quite petting at first, only resting along the dark fur of his head. Sentry closed his eyes. Maris inhaled sharply and covered her mouth with her other hand. The tears came silently. No collapse, no speech. Just a woman standing in a truck stop office, touching the dog she had been told was gone, while the last clean wall between grief and truth gave way. Corbett looked down because watching felt like trespass. Sabine gave them several seconds before returning to the papers. When she spoke, her voice was softer, but still precise. If Arlen's suspected cases were being rotated back into the system under altered numbers, the K9 transport category would be a convenient cover. Training aides move often. Dogs move between facilities. Contractors handle equipment. Small carriers do short legs. Everyone assumes someone else checked the seal. Bonnie's keys clicked once at her hip. And if someone did ask, Sabine looked toward the storage room. Maybe they ended up with a problem that had to be moved. The computer on Bonnie's desk chimed. Everyone looked. Bonnie wiped under one eye quickly, annoyed at herself for having one, then leaned over the keyboard. A new notice had appeared in the freight management portal connected to the temporary hold. Her expression hardened. "What is it?" Odessa asked from the doorway. Bonnie read the update twice before answering. The orange case just changed status. Corbett stepped closer. Bonnie turned the monitor so they could see. KX4421, temporary hold amended. Emergency route correction authorized. Receiving party, Lake Banner Storage. Pickup required before 0600. Sabine's face went still. Bonnie clicked into the document. Signature, timestamp, insurance reference, carrier authorization, digital seal transfer, all neat, all current, all valid enough at first glance to make a local argument difficult. Corbett felt Sentry move beside Maris. The dog was staring at the storage room door again. Bonnie looked from the screen to Corbett, all the dry humor gone from her face. "Somebody knows we found it," she said. The office did not need anyone to say what came next. If the paperwork was real, the case could leave before morning. And this time, if they made one wrong move, the truth might not disappear in a snowstorm. It might disappear legally. Night came down fast after all that white. The snow outside White Gull Travel Center lost its clean blue shine and turned yellow beneath the parking lot lights. Plow ridges hardened along the edges of the fuel islands. Diesel engines idled in slow, heavy rows, throwing exhaust into the cold. Drivers moved in and out of the store with shoulders hunched, boots dark with slush, faces set toward coffee, restrooms, and whatever schedule had survived the storm. Inside the back office, the orange case had become the center of the building without being in the room. KX4421 sat behind the storage room door under camera view, sealed, photographed, and logged. No one had opened it. No one had moved it. Bonnie Ray Pender had taped a printed hold sheet beside the door and written the time across the top in black marker, so large it looked like a warning. Sergeant Corbett Drayton stood near the window, watching the reflection of his own uniform in the glass. His dark navy sleeves were creased from the long day. His radio had gone quiet. The silver evidence pen in his chest pocket felt heavier than it should have. Sentry lay near Helena Quade's chair. No longer on Corbett's parka because Helena had insisted the dog needed a dry blanket. Sentry had allowed the blanket. He had not accepted it. His head remained lifted, ears angled toward the storage room, amber-brown eyes following every footstep that came too close to the door. Maris Beckett sat stiffly at the edge of Bonnie's desk, one hand resting on Arlen's file box. She had not left. No one had asked her to. There were some rooms a widow had earned the right to stand in, even if the law had not found a form for it. Special Agent Sabine Porter Hale was on the phone near the hallway, her voice low and precise. She had been trying to reach a judge for an emergency hold order. Captain Odessa Wynne stood a few feet away, arms folded, listening without interrupting. Bonnie looked at the freight portal again and swore softly under her breath. "Still active?" Corbett asked. "Worse," she said. "Cleaner." She turned the monitor so he could see. The pickup authorization now had a digital signature attached, along with insurance confirmation, destination code, seal transfer agreement, and receiving party verification. Lake Banner Storage. Pickup required before 0600. Corbett looked at the timestamp. The request had been entered minutes after Sentry's microchip had been run through the system. That detail stayed in the room like a second heartbeat. Sabine ended her call and slid the phone into her pocket. "Judge is reviewing. No signed order yet." Odessa's eyes went to the storage door. "How long do we have?" As if the question had called it into being. Headlights swept across the side window. A small white box truck rolled past the fuel island without stopping for gas. It turned carefully along the cleared lane and parked near the side entrance, engine rattling in the cold. It looked plain enough to be invisible. No bright logo, no dramatic markings, just a magnetic sign on the door that read Lake Banner Storage. Sentry stood, not quickly. His body was too tired for that. But the change in him sharpened the whole office. His paws found the floor, his head lowered, and the folded tip of his right ear angled outward. Helena reached for the lead. Easy. Corbett did not move toward the door. That was the first victory of the night, and no one applauded it. A young man stepped inside carrying a tablet and a plastic document folder. He was in his late 20s, maybe 30, narrow-faced, with tired eyes behind fogged glasses and a brown knit cap pulled too low over his ears. His reflective work jacket was zipped to his chin. Snow clung to his cuffs. He looked less like a criminal than a man who had been sent into the wrong room at the worst possible time. "White Gull Receiving?" he asked. Bonnie stared at him. "Depends how much trouble you brought with you." The young man blinked. "I'm Evan Tolliver, Lake Banner Storage. I've got an emergency route correction for one sealed training equipment case, KX44421. No one answered at once. Evan's gaze moved from Bonnie to Corbett's badge, then to Odessa, then to Sabine. His face lost color in stages. "I just pick up and sign," he said, raising the folder slightly. "I don't know what this is." Sabine stepped forward. "Special Agent Hale, Michigan State Criminal Investigations." "Let's see the order." Evan handed it over so quickly the pages almost slid from the folder. His hands shook, but not in a guilty way. More like a man whose ordinary job had turned into something with consequences. Sabine read. Odessa read over her shoulder. Bonnie read from the side and made a noise of pure dislike. Corbett stayed near Sentry. The dog's eyes never left Evan's folder. "Who dispatched you?" Sabine asked. "System pinged my route app," Evan said. "Supervisor approved it. Name, Delia Marsh, night routing. Call her." Evan did. The call went to speaker. A woman answered after 2 rings, brisk and annoyed, as if every question cost money. She confirmed Evan's name, the truck number, the updated route, the receiving authority, and the destination code. She gave reference numbers before Sabine asked. She did not sound surprised enough. She did not sound nervous enough. That bothered Corbett more than panic would have. When Sabine pressed about the late status change, the woman said, "State hold cleared under corrected classification. Our records show no active seizure order." Sabine's face did not change. "There is an active review. With respect, Agent, a review is not a hold." The call ended with the kind of politeness that left fingerprints. Odessa turned to Corbett before he could speak. "No." He looked at her. She did not soften it. "I know what you want to do. Do not do it." Corbett's jaw tightened. Every part of him wanted to lock the storage room and place himself in front of the door. He wanted to invent a delay, find a missing line, argue the seal, question the driver until morning. He wanted to make the law bend just enough to cover the place where his guilt was screaming. Odessa's voice dropped. "You stayed quiet once because you were afraid the truth would damage a good man's name. Do not damage this case now because you are afraid you waited too long." The words hit him harder than an order. Corbett looked toward Maris. She was watching him, not pleading, not forgiving, not accusing, just watching to see whether he would choose the easy wrong this time because it looked like justice. Sentry gave a low sound. Not a bark, not a threat, a warning made of breath. Corbett crouched beside him. "I know," he said. Sentry trembled at the end of the lead. eyes bright, body angled toward the storage door. Corbett kept his hand near the dog's shoulder but did not hold him down. "We do it right." For a moment, the words seemed to cost Sentry more than they cost the man. Then the dog held. The transfer took 12 minutes. Sabine read every line of the paperwork aloud for the record. Bonnie printed 2 copies and stamped the time in red. Odessa kept her body cam centered. Corbett recorded the condition of the storage room door before it opened, the seal on the orange case, the label, the corners, the handle, Evans' badge, Evans' truck plate, the truck's cargo bay. The moment the case crossed the threshold, no one rushed. No one gave the people behind the paperwork a sloppy second to hide inside later. Evan rolled the case out on a low dolly. His face was pale with concentration. He did not look at Sentry after the first time, perhaps because he was afraid of the dog, or perhaps because the dog looked too much like judgment. As the orange case passed the office, Sentry surged forward. Helena braced the lead with both hands, but she did not yank. Corbett moved with the dog, keeping close, his voice low. "Steady, steady." Sentry stopped at the edge of the hallway tile. His whole body shook. His paws scraped once against the floor, not from aggression, but from restraint. The case passed 3 feet in front of him. Maris pressed one hand over her mouth. Corbett watched the orange shell move toward the side door and felt the past repeat itself without the mercy of distance. 3 years ago, the item had vanished in snow, confusion, and paperwork. This time it left under light, names, cameras, and signatures. It still felt like losing. The box truck pulled away from White Gull at 8:41 p.m. Bonnie was already moving before the tail lights reached the highway. "I want every angle," she said. "Fuel island, side door, hold lot, road entrance, and the one by the ice machine that everyone forgets works better than the expensive cameras." Sabine looked at her. "You have one by the ice machine?" Bonnie gave her a flat look. "I have survived truck stop management for 21 years. I have eyes where the Lord forgot to put them." Within 10 minutes, Bonnie had footage copied to 2 drives and 1 secure link. Evans' paperwork was scanned. His dispatch call was logged. His truck plate was sent to State Traffic Coordination. Odessa notified local patrol not to stop the truck without instruction. A bad stop could poison the clean trail they had just built. Corbett stepped outside with Helena and Sentry to the patch of snow where the box truck had been parked. The cold hit like a hand across the face. Sentry lowered his nose carefully, moving around the tire tracks and the wet rectangle where the lift gate had dripped slush. He was tired. Helena watched every step. "Do not ask too much of him," she said. "I'm not. You want to." Corbett did not deny it. Sentry sniffed the packed snow near the rear tires, then the edge of the pallet scrape where the dolly had turned. He paused at a dark smear near the curb and inhaled again. Helena crouched beside him. Industrial oil, old wood, road salt, something chemical. Could be cleaning solution, could be training site disinfectant. Not a scent trail to follow across the highway. Corbett looked toward the road where the truck's lights had disappeared. "But it tells us where he's been." "Maybe what kind of place the case has been around," Helena corrected. "Don't turn him into a miracle because you need one." The words were not gentle, but they were kind in the way truth could be kind if delivered before harm was done. Corbett nodded. "Fair." Sentry leaned briefly against his leg, then sat down in the snow, exhausted. Corbett removed his gloves and touched the old black collar at the dog's neck, just for a second. "You did enough." Back inside, Sabine worked faster than she had all day. Traffic cameras placed Evans' truck moving north, then east. A toll reader caught the plate near a service road. A county snowplow's dash camera recorded the truck turning away from the route listed on the Lake Banner order. Bonnie enlarged one still frame until the image blurred around the edges. "That's not the road to Lake Banner," she said. Sabine marked the turn on a map with her blue highlighter. "No." Odessa leaned closer. "Where does it go?" Sabine followed the road line with the marker. "Old training property near the border. Closed facility. Former leaseholder. Granite Field Training." Helena looked toward Sentry. The German shepherd had lowered himself onto Corbett's parka again, eyes half closed, but at the sound of the name, his ears moved. No one made too much of it. No one needed to. Sabine gathered the camera records, dispatch logs, microchip timing, route deviation, prior contractor links, and Maris's documents into one clean packet. Her voice was controlled, but there was energy beneath it now. This may be enough for a search warrant. Corbett stared at the map. The orange case was gone from White Gull. He had watched it leave. He had let it leave. But there was a difference between losing something and letting it create a trail. 3 years earlier, Corbett had accepted a final page because it was easier than proving the page was wrong. Tonight, he looked at the route line bending away from its lawful destination and understood that obedience was not the same as surrender. Sentry had guarded the question until humans finally learned how to follow it. Sabine picked up her phone and stepped into the hall to call the judge again. Corbett stayed by the desk, one hand resting on the map, the other near Sentry's tired body. Outside, the box truck was somewhere on a winter road. For the first time since it left, Corbett did not feel the old helplessness rising. This time, the snow had tracks. The winter roads north of White Gull Travel Center did not forgive speed. They ran between walls of black pine and white snow, narrowed by plow banks, polished in places by wind, and broken by patches of frozen slush where headlights turned the surface into dull silver. Lake Superior was somewhere beyond the trees, unseen but present, pushing cold air across the upper peninsula hard enough to make the cruisers tremble when the gusts hit broadside. Special Agent Sabine Porter Hale did not order a chase. That disappointed some part of Corbett Drayton he did not like admitting still existed. A younger officer inside him wanted sirens, distance closing, the clean moral shape of pursuit. But the man he was now stood beside a conference table at the White Gull office and watched Sabine build the case with paper, camera stills, time-stamped logs, and clean probable cause. The search warrant request rested on facts, not fury. The Lake Banner truck had left the route listed on its transfer order. The emergency pickup had activated minutes after Sentry's microchip search. Sentry's death record was missing ordinary confirmation. KX4421 matched an old transport pattern connected to Arlen Beckett's final run. Pale River, Lake Banner, Granite Field, and Northline all touched the same narrow world of K9 contractors and evidence movement. White Gull's cameras had captured the pickup from door to roadway. No single fact could carry the weight alone. Together they began to stand. Captain Odessa Wynne made sure Corbett understood his place before they left. "You are not leading this," she said. They stood near the side entrance, where the glass was fogged from bodies moving in and out of cold. Odessa's dark command coat was buttoned to the throat, her face unreadable except for the tiredness at the edges of her eyes. "I know," Corbett said. "Knowing is easier here than it will be out there." He looked past her to where Sentry stood with Helena Quaid beside the county animal care truck. The German Shepherd wore a black K9 harness borrowed from local equipment storage, but the fit was slightly wrong on his lean body. He tolerated it, just as he tolerated care, rest, and the medical balm Helena had placed on his scraped pads. His head was up. His eyes were on the road. Corbett looked back at Odessa. "I'm a witness with relevant history." "And a man with unfinished grief," Odessa said. Do not confuse the two. He almost resented her for saying it. Then he realized resentment was simply pride looking for a warmer coat. "I won't," he said. The convoy moved without drama. Sabine rode ahead with 2 state units. Odessa followed. Corbett sat in the passenger seat of Helena's truck, because it was the only place he could be near Sentry without pretending he was in charge. Sentry lay on a padded mat in the back, awake but still, his breath fogging faintly in the dim cabin. Helena drove with both hands on the wheel, shoulders relaxed in the stubborn way of someone used to bad roads and worse decisions from people who thought urgency outranked sense. "You keep looking back," she said. "He's working. He's surviving." Corbett did not answer. Helena's eyes stayed on the road. Those are different things. The first real break came at an old way station off a service road, long closed except for its lights and cameras. The Lake Banner truck sat near the empty scale platform, engine off, rear door open to the night. Evan Tolliver was still there. He stood beside the truck with both hands raised before anyone asked, pale beneath the red wash of cruiser lights. His knit cap was crooked. His glasses had fogged and cleared and fogged again. He looked less like a man caught committing something than one abandoned inside a machine he did not understand. "I didn't know," he kept saying. I swear I didn't know. Sabine approached him first, calm and careful. Where is the case? Evan swallowed hard. A second update came through. New transfer. Same authorization chain. It said handoff at this station. Verified receiver. Name? He shook his head. The app only showed a receiver ID. A man came in a dark pickup. He had the code. He had the signature. He knew the case weight. What did he look like? Older gray beard, heavy coat, no logo. Evan wiped at his glasses with a trembling sleeve. I thought it was weird. But weird happens all the time with emergency freight. You call, they tell you the system is right, and if you argue, you lose the route. Bonnie would have had a sentence for that. Corbett could almost hear it. The system is right until somebody has to live with what it did. Sabine kept Evan talking while state technicians photographed the truck. Corbett remained back as instructed, hands still, jaw tight. He watched a young driver give up every detail he had, not because he was noble, but because fear had burned away any room for performance. Inside the cargo bay, the orange case was gone. Sentry stepped down from Helena's truck with effort. The cold hit him, and his front legs stiffened for half a second before he recovered. Helena saw it immediately. Slow, she warned. Corbett nodded, though the warning felt aimed at more than his pace. They brought Sentry to the open cargo bay. He sniffed the metal floor, then a scuffed area near the left wall. His nose found an old moving blanket folded behind a strap rail. He paused there, inhaling, then looked toward the service road cutting behind the way station. The dog did not bark. He simply faced north. Helena crouched and touched the blanket with gloved fingers. Same industrial oil. Old wood. Disinfectant. And something kennel-related. Not fresh enough for a straight trail through this wind. But enough to point direction, Corbett said. Enough to support what the traffic data already suggests, Helena corrected. He looked at her. She held his gaze. Do not make him prove what the humans can prove. That sentence stayed with him longer than he expected. Sabine obtained the signed search warrant at 10:18 p.m. By then, the route had narrowed to a side road leading toward the old Granite Field training property, a closed K-9 facility near the border. The place had once handled contract training, boarding, and equipment storage. It had been shut down 2 winters earlier after a licensing dispute, though the paper trail around it had never fully gone quiet. The facility appeared through the trees like a memory no one wanted. A low building, long kennels, chain link runs half buried in snow. A faded sign swinging from one frozen hook. The words Granite Field K-9 Training were barely visible under weathered paint. A security light over the main door flickered weakly, giving the snow below it a sick yellow pulse. Sabine entered with the search team. Corbett followed only after Odessa gave a short nod. Inside, the air smelled of cold concrete, old straw, cleaning chemicals, and disuse. Their lights moved over empty kennels, cracked food bowls, broken clipboards, stacked training sleeves, and a wall calendar from years before. A file cabinet stood open, drawers emptied in haste. In a metal trash barrel, half-burned papers had curled into black petals. No one touched them until the evidence technician marked the scene. Sentry moved carefully through the corridor. Helena beside him, Corbett a step behind. The dog was tired enough that each pause looked like a decision. He sniffed a kennel door, then a drain, then an old leather lead hanging from a hook. At the far end of the hall, he stopped. The room there had a broken lock and a narrow window filmed with frost. Its door was partly open. On the inside panel, low to the floor, were old claw marks carved into the wood. Helena's flashlight steadied on them. No one spoke at first. The marks were not fresh. Time had darkened them. Dust had settled inside some of the grooves. But they were deep in places, frantic at first glance, then lower and weaker toward the bottom. Sentry stepped closer and touched his nose to the door. Corbett felt something inside him turn cold and quiet. Helena's voice was soft, stripped of all argument. Those are old. Corbett looked at Sentry's right shoulder, where the thin scar vanished beneath black and tan fur. He looked at the room, the claw marks, the rusted water bowl in the corner. The report had said Sentry was transferred to medical handling after the bridge. The room said he had been held here, maybe days, maybe longer. Not as a partner, not as a living witness, as a problem waiting for paperwork to make him disappear. Corbett placed one hand against the hallway wall. Not for balance, he told himself. Then he admitted it was for balance. Helena stepped in front of him, not blocking his view, just entering it. "He does not owe you more tonight," she said. Corbett looked at her. The words should have cut. Instead, they opened something. For 3 years he had carried his own guilt as if it gave him a right to demand answers from anything that survived. From a file, from a widow, from a dog. He crouched beside Sentry. The German shepherd did not look at him. His eyes stayed on the marked door. "You did enough," Corbett said. "Back then, today, all of it." Sentry closed his eyes once, slow. A shout came from outside. Not panic. A call over radio. Movement. Sabine's voice snapped through the corridor. "Dark pickup leaving the rear access road. Do not pursue through the trees. Units 2 and 4. Intercept at Winter Checkpoint 7. Corbett stood. Every instinct wanted his feet moving. Odessa's hand came up before he took one step. She was watching him from the intersection of the hall. "No." He stopped. This time, stopping did not feel like weakness. It felt like discipline finally earning its name. The pickup was stopped 12 minutes later at a seasonal checkpoint where the road narrowed between plow banks and state maintenance trucks had room to block without danger. The driver, a contract courier with a valid badge under another company name, gave a false explanation that failed before Sabine finished reading the timestamps. The orange case was in the covered bed of the truck. Still sealed, still marked KX4421. It came back to Granite Field under camera, under warrant, under witness. And this time no one had to choose between doing right and doing it clean. The case was opened in the main training room at 11:46 p.m. Sabine read the warrant number aloud. Odessa confirmed the seal. The evidence technician photographed every side. Bonnie was not there, but Corbett could imagine her insisting someone read the numbers louder. Inside were no dramatic stacks of money, no cinematic secret with a single label explaining everything. There were old body cameras, sealed memory cards, a cracked digital recorder, a ledger of evidence control numbers, a K9 training collar tagged with Sentry's old unit code, several encrypted drives wrapped in anti-static sleeves, dry things, administrative things, the kind of things people underestimated because they did not look like the truth until someone had the patience to read them. The first file they recovered from the cracked recorder was damaged, but enough remained. Arlen Beckett's voice came through thin speakers, rough with fatigue and road noise. "This is Lieutenant Arlen Beckett," he said. "If this reaches evidence control, log KX series transports against training returns. Boxes are coming back under new numbers. I have reason to believe the K9 equipment channel is being used to move protected evidence outside normal review." The room went utterly still. Corbett stopped breathing evenly. Arlen continued, voice tightening beneath the storm sounds. "I don't know who can still be trusted inside the chain. I'm delivering the original comparison files myself. If I don't make it to the facility, Sentry will not leave the case." The recording crackled, then ended. For several seconds, no one moved. Sentry stood beside Maris, who had arrived with Odessa's permission after the case was recovered. She had one hand on his harness. The dog looked toward the open case, then toward Corbett. Corbett had imagined proof would feel like relief. It did not. It felt like standing at the edge of the bridge again and finally seeing that the road had not simply ended. Someone had moved the signs. Someone had let the dark do the rest. Arlen had not been careless. He had been carrying the truth. And Sentry, hungry, hidden, erased on paper, had done exactly what his handler asked of him. Corbett lowered his eyes to the old recorder on the evidence cloth. 3 years of silence stood behind him. But in front of him at last was a voice. Wallace Creed Parrish did not arrive in handcuffs. That bothered Corbett Drayton more than he wanted to admit. By morning, the snow outside the North Marquette Police Department had hardened into ridges along the curb. Sunlight moved across the station windows in pale strips, too clean for what waited inside. Reporters had begun gathering across the street. By 8, their breath fogging in the cold, cameras pointed at the building as if truth might come out the front door if they waited long enough. Wallace came through the side entrance at 8:17 with an attorney beside him. He was 61, maybe older in the eyes than the files said. Tall enough to have once commanded a training field without raising his voice, but thinner now, his frame held together by posture and pride. His silver hair was combed back neatly. He wore a charcoal overcoat, black gloves, and polished winter shoes that had no business on slush. His face was long, lined, controlled. The kind of face people trusted when it stood beside a flag and spoke about service. In his left hand he carried a small leather case. Corbett noticed it before he noticed the attorney. Grant Belmore, Wallace's lawyer, was a compact man with careful gray hair and a wool scarf folded too perfectly beneath his coat. He had the calm, expensive look of someone who understood that silence could be billed by the hour. Special Agent Sabine Hale met them in interview room 2. Odessa Wynne stood at the back wall. Corbett had been allowed to observe from behind the glass, not inside the room. That was the correct decision. It still felt like being told to stand outside his own guilt. Wallace sat without asking for water. He removed his gloves finger by finger and laid them on the table. Then he opened the leather case and took out an old silver K9 whistle. He did not blow it. He simply placed it beside his folded hands. Corbett felt Sentry shift beside Helena in the observation room. The German Shepherd had been medically cleared to remain for the morning under Helena's supervision, though cleared was too generous a word. Sentry was stable, hydrated, and awake. He was not well. His black K9 harness sat more comfortably now, adjusted by Helena, but the old nameplate still hung at his collar. When the silver whistle touched the table on the monitor, Sentry's body went rigid. Helena immediately lowered one hand to his shoulder. Easy. Corbett looked down. Sentry was not growling. He was not lunging. He was remembering. That was worse. Inside the interview room, Sabine's eyes moved from the whistle to Wallace's face. "You brought a training whistle to a recorded interview." Wallace looked at it with something that almost resembled affection. "Old habit. Leave it on the table." "Of course." Sabine began with names, dates, companies, invoices, transfer orders, and the data recovered from KX-4421. She did not accuse him in grand language. She built the room smaller around him, fact by fact, until there was less and less space for his calm to sit. Wallace did not deny the unofficial transfers. He did not deny Northline's relationship with Lake Banner Storage, Granite Field Training, or Pale River Transit. He did not deny that the K9 equipment channel had been used to move items that should have stayed in formal evidence control. He only denied the word corruption. "That word is convenient," Wallace said. His voice was even, cultured by years of command meetings and public ceremonies. "It makes everyone in hindsight feel clean. You say corruption, and suddenly no one has to remember the budget cuts, the dogs aging out without medical support, the handlers buying supplies with personal checks, the county asking for results, while cutting the very program that produced them." Sabine did not blink. "So you created an off-book fund." Grant Belmore lifted one hand. "My client has not agreed to that phrasing." Wallace looked at his lawyer with mild irritation. "It was a support account." "A support account built from misdirected property," Sabine said. "A support account built from items no one in power cared about until they needed a headline." Wallace leaned forward slightly. "Those dogs found missing people. They protected officers on winter roads. They stood between strangers and harm more times than the public will ever know. When the program was about to collapse, I kept it alive." Behind the glass, Corbett felt anger rise, then stop. Because the worst part was not that Wallace sounded like a liar. The worst part was that some of what he said had once been true. The K9 unit had been underfunded. Handlers had begged for gear. Corbett remembered Arlen repairing a cracked kennel latch himself because the purchase order had been delayed. He remembered Sentry as a young dog waiting patiently beside a training cone, while Arlen laughed and said loyalty did not come cheap, but departments always tried to get a discount. Truth had been the soil Wallace planted the lie in. That made the lie grow stronger. Sabine opened a folder. Arlen Beckett discovered the rotations. Wallace's expression changed for the first time. Not fear, irritation, edged with sorrow he seemed to resent feeling. "Arlen was a good handler," he said. "That is not an answer. He was a good handler," Wallace repeated, "and a rigid man. He believed every line on every form had moral weight." "It does." "No," Wallace said. "People have moral weight. Dogs do. Results do. Forms are supposed to serve those things, not strangle them." Sabine was silent for a beat. Then she asked very quietly, Then what was Arlen Beckett? Wallace's eyes sharpened. A person, Sabine said. A handler, a husband, a man driving through a snowstorm with evidence that made your support account look like what it was. Grant Belmore shifted. Agent Hale. Sabine did not look away from Wallace. Was he one of the small sacrifices? The room changed. Even through glass, Corbett felt it. Wallace sat back as if the question had touched something under his ribs. For the first time, command left his face and age came through. I did not cause that bridge accident, Wallace said. No one has said you did. I did not order anyone to harm Arlen. No one in this room has used that claim. Wallace's hand moved toward the whistle, then stopped. The weather was terrible. He should have turned back. But after the crash, Sabine said, you knew what he was carrying. Wallace said nothing. You delayed the full transport description. You did not report Sentry's condition accurately. You authorized the dog's removal from the scene. You signed off on a contractor note, marking him deceased without proper veterinary confirmation. You allowed the final report to treat the missing KX case as unrecovered material, instead of protected evidence tied to an internal concern. Grant Belmore spoke softly. My client will need a pause. Wallace raised one hand. No, his voice had changed, lower now, less polished. I made decisions in a storm, Wallace said. Not from a throne, not with perfect information. Men like Agent Hale have the luxury of naming things later. Sabine looked at him with no visible anger. Arlen did not have that luxury. The words stayed in the room after they were spoken. Behind the glass, Sentry gave a faint whine. It was the smallest sound Corbett had heard from him. Helena's hand tightened gently around the harness strap, not to restrain him, only to reassure. I know, she whispered. I know. Corbett crouched beside the dog. Sentry's eyes remained on the monitor, fixed on the old whistle. For 3 years, Corbett had imagined guilt as a private room, a place he could lock from the inside and call discipline. Now he saw it spread through a system. One man bending rules for money he called support. Another man signing a page because he wanted peace for a widow. A contractor changing a status line. An officer deciding one more question would only make grief uglier. No single person had carried the whole wrong. That was why it had survived. By noon, Wallace's legal team had begun its own defense outside the interview room. The first local article appeared before lunch. It did not mention all the evidence. It mentioned Corbett, North Marquette sergeant, who signed Beckett report now central to reopened case. The headline spread across phones faster than any official statement could catch it. By 2, comments had begun. Some called Corbett brave. Others called him a hypocrite. A few asked why a man who had accepted the first report was now allowed anywhere near the second one. Corbett read none of them after the first 3. Odessa found him in the corridor near the evidence office, standing under fluorescent light with his phone dark in his hand. You have a union rep waiting, she said. Internal review wants a preliminary statement. I know. You do not have to give them everything today. He looked at her. Yes, I do. Odessa studied him for a moment, then stepped aside. The internal hearing was not dramatic. That almost made it harder. No courtroom, no crowd. Just a conference room with a recorder, 2 administrators, Odessa at one end of the table, and Corbett sitting straight in his dark navy uniform with the silver pen laid in front of him. He stated the facts. 3 years earlier, he had seen a mismatch between a scene photograph and the final transport summary. He had asked one question. A superior told him it was a data correction. He accepted it. He did not document his concerns separately. He did not request an additional review. He allowed a report he knew was incomplete to become official truth. He did not raise his voice. He did not protect himself with noble language. I did not falsify the report, he said, but I helped it stand. I chose quiet because quiet looked kinder than doubt. I was wrong. One administrator asked whether he was saying he had acted out of fear. Corbett looked at the pen. No, he said. I acted out of comfort. Fear would make it sound cleaner. Odessa's eyes remained on the table. Afterward, no one told him he had done the right thing. Maybe because doing the right thing late did not deserve applause. It deserved continuation. The last fight of the day was not about Wallace. It was about Sentry. A contract representative argued by phone that the dog's legal status was unclear. A property clerk suggested Sentry might need to be housed under evidence control until ownership could be determined. The phrase made Helena Quaid stand so still that Corbett thought for one dangerous second she might throw something. "He is not a sealed item," Helena said. The property clerk, a tired man who clearly regretted answering the phone, said he understood that, but procedure required. "No," Helena said. "Procedure requires accurate classification. This is a living animal with medical needs, trauma history, and a verified former handler's family present." Maris stood beside Sentry near the lobby windows, one hand resting lightly on his neck. She had been quiet through most of the afternoon, but now she lifted her chin. "He was my husband's partner," she said. "If the department wants to discuss where he belongs tonight, they can discuss it while looking at me." No one rushed to answer. Corbett could have stepped in then. He could have asked to keep Sentry temporarily. He could have argued that the dog trusted him, that he had found him, that the investigation still needed him nearby. All of that would have sounded reasonable. All of it would have been selfish. He gathered the medical notes Helena had prepared, Sentry's old chip record, Arlen's handler photographs, and the current welfare assessment. He placed them in front of Odessa. "Temporary care with Arlen Beckett," he said. "Medical follow-up through Dr. Quaid. Access for investigators by appointment. No kenneling unless ordered by a judge for a specific reason." Odessa read the recommendation, then she signed. Sentry left the station just after sunset. The reporters had thinned. Snow had begun again, not hard, just enough to blur the edges of cars and footsteps. Maris wore her burgundy scarf pulled close. Sentry walked beside her, slower than a trained K9 should have, but steadier than he had been that morning. Corbett stood near the station doors and kept his hands at his sides. After a few steps, Sentry stopped. Maris stopped with him. The German shepherd turned back. For one breath, Corbett wanted to call him. The word rose in him easily, too easily. "Sentry, come, stay." Any command would have given shape to the ache. Corbett said nothing. Sentry came back on his own. He crossed the salted pavement, placed his nose against Corbett's open hand, and held there for a single second. Warm breath against cold skin. A living answer, not to the case, but to the man. Then Sentry turned and went back to Maris. Corbett watched them move toward her car under the falling snow. Only then did he understand something. Arlen must have known from the beginning. Loyalty was not ownership. It was the courage to let the right bond lead. By the time the case reached open court, winter had not left North Marquette. It had only grown tired. The snow on the courthouse steps no longer looked sharp and untouched. It had softened along the edges, sagging from rooflines and gathering in gray ridges where boots and salt had worked it down. Lake Superior still held its cold blue weight beyond the town, but the daylight lasted longer now. In late afternoon, the sun stayed on the windows of the courthouse, long enough to make the old stone glow. 3 months had passed since Sentry had been found inside the sealed trailer at White Gull Travel Center. In that time, the truth had stopped being a single orange case and become a system of documents, hearings, sworn statements, reviewed convictions, suspended contracts, and officers who now answered questions they had once trained themselves not to ask. The investigation had reached farther than Corbett Drayton had expected, not because every person involved had been evil, but because too many people had treated small wrongs as practical necessities. Evidence control numbers had to be reviewed. Old K9 contractor invoices had to be matched against transport logs. Cases once considered clean had to be checked again, because justice, once touched by false paperwork, could not simply be declared clean by good intentions. Wallace Creed Parrish stood before the court in a dark suit, still dignified, still upright, still convinced that history would understand him more kindly than the law did. He spoke of budget cuts, abandoned dogs, missing equipment, dangerous roads, and handlers left to do too much with too little. Some people in the courtroom looked down when he said those things. Not because he was right, but because the truth inside a bad excuse could still sting. Then the judge, an older woman with silver hair and a voice worn smooth by years of listening to people justify damage, said that a worthy program did not give anyone permission to trade away truth. Good intentions did not turn false records into sacrifice. A badge, a leash, a contract, and a cause could all become dangerous when no one was allowed to question them. Wallace did not look at Corbett when the findings were read. Corbett did not need him to. The revised report on Lieutenant Arlen Beckett came 2 weeks later. It did not bring Arlen back. It did not return the 3 years Maris had spent being told to accept a smaller story. But the new report did what the old one had refused to do. It named the missing facts. Arlen had been transporting comparison files tied to altered KX series evidence movement. His final route had not been routine. The delay in reporting the full nature of his cargo had affected the search and recovery response. Sentry had survived the incident. Sentry's death record had been falsified. The original conclusion had been incomplete. Corbett read the report alone in his office after sunset. The printed pages laid flat beneath the same desk lamp he had used for years. His silver evidence pen sat beside them. He did not pick it up. For a long time he only looked at the line that corrected Sentry's status. Survived. One word. Late by 3 years, but still alive. His own discipline came without ceremony. He lost his path to captain. He was removed from field command for 1 year and reassigned to policy review, contractor oversight training, and evidence chain reform. The letter was formal, clean, and mercifully free of praise. Corbett appreciated that. Praise would have made it feel dishonest. Captain Odessa Wynne handed him the folder herself. "You can appeal part of it," she said. Corbett read the first page, then closed it. No. Odessa studied him from across the desk. "That answer cost you less than it would have a few months ago. It still costs. It should." There was no cruelty in her voice, only the kind of respect that did not soften consequence. Corbett nodded. The new procedures began as dry language on county letterhead: mandatory independent seal verification, contractor access audits, live animal welfare escalation, retired K9 tracking, required notation of unresolved discrepancies, automatic preservation of camera footage for transport holds. A rule that sounded obvious once written. A living dog could not be classified only as property when medical condition, handler history, or welfare concerns were in dispute. Bonnie Ray Pender read that last line when Corbett brought a copy to White Gull and gave a satisfied grunt. "Well," she said, standing behind the counter with her apron dusted in flour from a broken breakfast sandwich shipment, "took them long enough to learn dogs breathe." Bonnie had become part of the case history in a way she pretended annoyed her. Her camera backups, printed timestamps, and stubborn refusal to let anyone borrow the original storage footage had appeared in more than one official summary. She kept a copy of the new policy taped under the counter, where drivers would not see it, but she would know it was there. Helena Quaid cared less about the courtroom and more about whether Sentry was eating, sleeping, and allowing his pads to heal. Under her care and Maris's patience, Sentry gained weight. His coat recovered its deep black and tan shine. The saddle on his back still sat heavier to the left. The slight bend in his right ear still gave his alert face a vulnerable mark, and the scar on his shoulder remained a thin line when the fur parted. He would never be the young K9 from Arlen's training photos again. That was not failure. It was survival. At first, Sentry stayed close to Maris's house, sleeping near the hallway where he could see both the front door and the stairs. He woke at hard sounds. He watched delivery trucks too carefully, but he also learned the quiet rhythms of a home that did not demand service from him. Maris fed him at the same time every morning. Helena visited twice a week. Corbett did not visit unless invited. The first invitation came on a Sunday afternoon. Maris opened the door before he knocked a second time. She wore her burgundy scarf, though she was indoors, and Sentry stood beside her, steady and calm. "He keeps sitting next to people who cry," Maris said. Corbett looked down at Sentry. "That sounds like him." "There's a court support program in the county," she said. "Helena thinks he may qualify. Not as a detection dog, not enforcement, just presence." The word presence stayed with Corbett all the way home. Some duties asked a dog to find what was hidden. Some asked him to stay beside what was breaking. By the time the Winter Ice Festival finally opened, Sentry had a new harness, black, lighter than his old K9 gear, with a small patch stitched in clean white letters, Court Support K9. Maris had insisted his scratched old Sentry nameplate remain attached beside the new tag. "He earned both," she told Helena. The festival filled the square outside the courthouse with light. Ice sculptures lined the walkways. A lighthouse, a patrol car, a gull with outstretched wings, a dog sitting proudly beside a carved bench. Children in bright coats circled the displays while parents held paper cups of hot chocolate. The sky was clear and intensely blue. Snow flashed under the sun. For once, North Marquette looked exactly as beautiful as it wanted visitors to believe. Corbett stood at the edge of the square in his dark navy coat, not on a platform, not beside a podium. There was no ceremony for him, no medal, no public apology delivered under flags. That, too, felt right. He watched Maris arrive with Sentry at her side. She moved through the crowd slowly, allowing people to notice the dog but not overwhelm him. Sentry accepted the attention with dignity, his eyes calm, his body angled toward Maris but aware of everyone. Near the courthouse steps, a young witness stood with a victim advocate, shaking so hard the paper cup in both hands trembled. He looked old enough to be angry at his own fear, and young enough to be ashamed of needing help. The advocate crouched to speak to him, but the boy's eyes kept returning to the courthouse doors. Maris looked at Corbett once. He did not give a command. She bent near Sentry and said something too soft for Corbett to hear. Sentry walked forward. He did not hurry. He did not perform. He simply sat beside the young witness and rested his head gently against the boy's knee. The paper cup stopped shaking. The fear did not vanish. Corbett could see that. Real fear did not leave because a dog arrived. But the boy's breathing changed. His shoulders lowered. One hand left the cup and settled, uncertainly at first, on Sentry's head. Corbett remembered the office at White Gull, the air brake outside, the memory of Arlen's bridge, and Sentry's shoulder pressing into his leg before he could fall too far into the past. Arlen had trained a dog to hold people in the present. Sentry was still doing it. Maris came to stand beside Corbett. For a while neither of them spoke. The courthouse bell rang once. "He would be glad," Maris said finally. Corbett looked at Sentry, then at the open courthouse doors. "That Sentry still has a job?" Maris's mouth moved in something too small to be a smile, but too warm to be grief alone. That this job was chosen for him. Corbett nodded. There were apologies he still owed and forgiveness she had not promised. There were old reports in storage with revised covers and new questions in courtrooms across the county. The truth had not fixed everything. It had only made repair possible. The young witness rose. Sentry rose with him and walked at his side into the courthouse. He did not look back for Corbett. Corbett did not call. That was the final lesson. Quieter than any verdict and harder than any confession. Loyalty was not the right to keep what had saved you. Sometimes loyalty meant letting that saving become useful somewhere else. The courthouse doors closed behind Sentry and the boy. Outside, the festival continued. Children laughed near the carved lighthouse. Sunlight moved through ice and broke into colors on the snow. Corbett stood beside Maris in the bright cold morning and felt, for the first time in 3 years, that he was no longer guarding a lie. He was only watching the truth walk forward without needing his command. In the end, Sentry did not save the truth by force. He saved it by staying faithful to what had been entrusted to him. And Corbett's greatest act was not chasing the case, winning praise, or keeping the dog for himself. It was choosing the harder road, telling the truth, accepting the cost, and letting loyalty belong where it was meant to heal. Maybe that is a lesson for all of us. Sometimes doing right does not give us applause. Sometimes it gives us peace. Sometimes grace comes quietly, through a second chance, a faithful companion, or the courage to correct what we once left unfinished. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what Sentry's loyalty meant to you. And if you want more stories about courage, justice, and the quiet ways hope finds its way back, please subscribe and stay with us. May you find peace in the truth and strength to do what is right when it matters most.